between 77 and 83, I got so many, I don't know, 17, 18 albums maybe that, that I played on that were just, some of them were hits. A lot of them were, and some of them were, just good songs. So
I want to talk about some of my favorites in particular.
Okay.
You mentioned Stargard first, and Which Way Is Up, great track. And, from the Richard Pryor movie of the same name. Yeah. So I think that might have gone #1 on the R&B chart. I'm not sure, but it was pretty much a monster. And, did you, as I remember, that long version was pretty long, so yeah. How long were you laying down that groove in the studio?
Well, I was pretty good at grooving, and my chops were pretty high because I'd been gigging for a long time, so it was pretty easy. But I probably laid the track in an hour. Probably took about an hour. But you always have spots where you have to punch and make adjustments and stuff like that. But yeah, probably about an hour. I mean, I learned pretty fast.
Did you get to meet the girls, the singers, at any point?
Yeah, I loved them. They were not only were they talented, they were beautiful. So it was at that time, I was 22, 23 years old. It was like, oh yeah, these sticks are gorgeous. Yeah, having them around the studio, working with them, and they were driven, especially Rochelle Runnels. Rochelle was she was the driving force behind the group. Rochelle was really, really just a talented, brilliant young lady who could just she was always pushing to make something happen. And it was a joy working with them in the studio. Yeah.
Did you also play on What You Waitin For? And
yeah, What You Waitin For? What You Waitin For?
That's another great one. And I think it was on their second album. I was in, it might have been VIP Records on Crenshaw in Los Angeles. Back then, the record stores, they would sometimes have DJs in the stores, and you could hear like something for the first time just being in one of those record stores. Very cool. And I heard Star Bob, and I thought it was Parliament Funkadelic. I mean, it's so funky. And I love that track. So I don't know if you played on that one, but that's another like great Stargard, really hardcore funk.
Yeah, no, I didn't play on that one. I didn't play on that one.
Yeah. So all this time you're in the studio, I guess you didn't get to go on the road much or at all, right?
I didn't. From 70, like I said, from 77 to about 82. So we didn't go on the road at all. Mammatapee didn't do it hardly anything. There would be lull times where we would be like, we'd be cutting straight for 3 or 4 straight months, right? And then we'd have 2 months where we didn't do anything. Then we come back in the studio 3, 4 straight months like that. On those lull times, I started taking like local gigs with local bands, mostly in Orange County, playing with some of the Orange County rock bands, and there were some dance bands and some, just a lot of club bands in Orange County. In fact, one of the groups I played with, the first group I played with when I hit my first lull, I was in the studio, and then no work for a month, right? Because all the other businesses going on, mastering and artwork and promotion and all that stuff, and there's no work for a month or 2 months. I joined a group called Live Jive out of Orange County, and Live Jive was the band that Bobby Caldwell was in, right? What happened was Bobby was playing with Danny Sipe and Live Jive. Danny Sipe was the leader of Live Jive, and Bobby got a record deal and came out with "I Guess You Wonder Where I've Been."
You went to for
right?
life. Yeah.
So he quit Live Jive, right? So Live Jive called me and said, "Hey man, can you come play with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." So I joined Live Jive, and I was off and on with Live Jive for a couple of years after that. It was a pretty good group. It was a pretty good group. It was one of those groups that they didn't know what they had when they had it, and so they never did anything. You know, they never tried to do anything collectively as a group. They were just happy playing bars, playing the Red Onion in Newport Beach and the White House in Seal Beach in Laguna Beach, and you know, just playing the local bars. But they never tried to do anything better. But it was a pretty good group.
Modest aspirations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about Rose Royce. So they were really Norman's marquee group at that for his label. I mean, they hit it so big with Car Wash right off the bat. And, you know, the thing about Rose Royce is when they first came out with Car Wash, you know, I took them for like a novelty act, you know, between the song and being part of a movie and the whole thing. I didn't really take them that seriously. But then, you know, over time, hearing more of their tracks, and I think I saw them part of a Funk Fest at some point, they were for real. And they had a lot of great tracks.
Yes, they did.
So, you know, they, of course, would go out on tour, but you would play on their studio records, but you never went out with them?
I have to explain this all the time to people because my name is on 3 of their albums, right, with bass credits and also writing credit because I co-wrote their last hit song. I was never in the group. They were signed. They had already hit when I got there. When I signed in '77, they were recording their 3rd album, and their bass player Duke Job was a great bass player. Mm-hmm. The only thing that he was a great bass player. I don't know why I got. Norman's favor. Duke could certainly play, but for some reason I got Norman's favor. And on the Strikes Again album, Norman had me play on a couple of songs on that album, and one of them was the single. But there was a couple of singles that came out. The first one was "You Abandoned Me, Love Don't Live Here Anymore."
Yeah, right? That's the best known one. Yeah,
that was number 1. The second one was "I'm in Love, ooh, and I love the feeling. Hey, I'm in love, I'm in love." I played on that song. That's one of the 2 songs I played on that song. I was never in the group, but whenever people introduce me, they say, "Yeah, and who played with Rose Royce, who played on Rose Royce, Car Wash. This is Mark Kenoly." I didn't play on Car Wash.
Well, no, I didn't say that.
I know you didn't. But this is my chance to explain it to the world. I know I didn't play on that album. I know I didn't play on "Ooh Boy, I Love You So, Never Ever Ever." I didn't play on that.
Or "Wishing on a Star." Yeah,
that was before I got to the label. I have to explain this to people everywhere I go. At my church, they introduced me like when, "Oh yeah, this is Mark Kenoly. He used to play on Car Wash." I'm like, "Oh man, not again."
Well, you have to be a real fan of R&B and funk to know further into their catalog what came later, you know. But, you know, I was curious, you know, Duke had some, you know, pretty well-known substance issues. So I don't know if that played into, you know, making an opportunity for you to slip in and do some of those when maybe he wasn't available. Maybe that influenced Norman a little bit.
That's probably part of it, because Rose Royce was really big those first 3 albums. Those first 3 albums, they were really big, and they were touring. they went out touring, you know, and then at one point, probably like 78, 79, they were one of the top 2 or 3 R&B acts in the United States. You know, at one time, there was hardly anybody bigger there. I remember the first time I went to see them live. It's like I spent years hanging out with them at the studio, and then finally I went to go see them live, like in maybe 79 or 80. And they played like 9 straight gold or platinum singles in their show. I was like, every one of these songs is a big hit, you know. So and I remember them. I saw them at the Inglewood Forum. You know, it was a good show. I was proud to know them. I was proud of them because by that time I had become friends with them. You know, and I was proud for them. They were good musicians. Who they were before they hit it big. They were the backup group for Edwin Starr. Remember Edwin Starr?
Oh yeah,
who did
25 Miles, War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were his backup band when he went out to tour. So
back to Whitfield's Motown days.
Yeah.
So, okay, you weren't a member, but you did play on 3 or 4 of their albums.
Say that again?
I said, okay. I said you weren't an official member, but you played on 3 or 4 Rose Royce albums.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I played on Rose Royce Strikes Again. I played on Rose Royce Jump Street. And I played on was Golden Touch. And Golden Touch was the one that I co-wrote this single with Norman and Walter Downing.
Yeah, I have that track list here. Yeah, title track. Yep. Number 4 in the running order.
Okay.
Yeah. So on the subsequent albums, you said you played on 2 tracks on that first one that you were with them. Roughly, how much did you play on the other records?
On
Rose Royce.
Let's see. On Jump Street, I don't know, maybe 3 songs. And then on Golden Touch, again, maybe 2. I can't remember. It's been so long since I've heard those. I can't remember everything that's on them, but yeah. At that time, I was playing so many Whitfield sessions. I was just like swamped.
Did you happen to play on Funkin Around?
That sounds like something I would have played on. I can't remember what it sounds like.
Well, I also show that Rainbow Connection. Were you on that one? That album?
Yeah, you know what? I forgot about that one. I think I did play on that.
Yeah. Did you play on? They actually covered "What You Waiting For" on that one. And "Bad Mother Funker" is a good.
Bad Mother Funker. I think that's Duke on that one.
And then they had a cool, funky instrumental called "Pizzazz."
I'm sorry. It's been so long. I can't remember. Your image is starting to get a little weird here. Is that
looks fine to me.
Looks fine to you? Okay.
Yeah. Just you.
Might be on my end then.
It's just you. You got to stop drinking when we do these. Make a note there. So Undisputed Truth, I had Joe on the show.
Oh, you had Joe Pep Harris?
Yeah. He's had an amazing career.
Yeah, yes.
And that particular record you played on, were you on that whole record with them, Smoking?
Which one?
Smoking, Undisputed Truth?
That's me on Smoking. Yeah. Cause it's showtime.
You're on Showtime?
Everybody get ready to get down. Yeah, that's me.
That's a killer track.
That's me. I had brought in some effects on the bass that Norman had not heard before, and he loved the sound that I had on. I had a little box called a funk machine, and it was basically an envelope follower type sound, and I also had an octave divider, which wherever I played the bass, it put a note an octave below it, so it's got that real heavy bottom on it. Gong, 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 you know, so that was me. He loved that sound. So, one thing I appreciated about Norman as a producer, one thing I learned from him, that in production you have to be courageous. You have to be courageous to variate from a sound that's been around for a long time and try new things. You know, now it might have been to his advantage that he was already a legend at that time. By the time I got when he was a legend, and he could do whatever he wanted, and people still like it. But he was not afraid to try the newest effects pedals or the newest synths or anything like that, and to find parts on his songs like that. And I learned that's important. That it takes courage to, you know, to vary away from what's worked for so long and try to do something different. And that was pretty special. That was pretty special.
Well, he showed that at Motown, and he definitely tried new things there. And the way he brought the funk to Motown through the Temptations was, you know, way funkier than the other stuff on Motown for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was he like in terms of temperament? You know, was he jovial? Was he intense? You know?
Yeah, he was both. He was when we were working, he was intense. He was focused. We would come in. We'd do sessions like this. He'd book a session for Monday afternoon at 2:00, right? 2:00 in the afternoon, and everybody had to be there. Everybody in the rhythm section would have to be there, and we'd be there, and we'd start recording. You know, after we got plugged in, you know, dialed in on the studio, tuned up, all of that, and we started working on a song. And we would work straight from Monday afternoon till maybe Friday night at 3 a.m. in the morning. Nobody would leave. Nobody would leave. We'd literally be in the studio. We'd lay a basic track, and then everybody would come in and clean up and overdub just straight for days at a time, but literally days at a time, 3-4 days at a time. He'd send somebody out for like $200 worth of fat burgers or down to Pink's hot dogs. Nobody would leave, right? Somebody go out, come back with food. Everybody would eat, and we'd start on another song. And we would just work through the night nonstop. And he would be there the whole time. He would be there the whole time. He'd lay his head over on the console while the playback was going on, right? This is like, you know, 2 days later, right? Everybody else would get a chance to sleep while somebody was overdubbing. Somebody would go in and overdub guitar parts or overdub keyboard parts or whatever, you know, overdub the bass parts or overdub drums or percussion or whatever. And everybody else would go out in the lobby, lay on the couch, lay on the floor, whatever, sleep for a couple of hours until we all had to come back in and do it again. And so that was pretty tense. I didn't know sessions went like that in those days, and it was a lot of fun. We was all young, you know, we were all young, so it was all cool. But we go nonstop, and then you know, in a week and a half, we would have like, you know, we'd have maybe 5 or 6 songs of an album where the rhythm tracks would basically be done. And then after that, it was just bring the singers in and working hard. The singers, what I remember, he had 3 engineers that worked 8-hour shifts each. It was Leonard Jackson, Steve Smith, and Bill Ravencraft. And they would work 8-hour shifts on the board, whatever Norman wanted. Norman stayed there the whole time. Those guys would come in and do their shift and leave. The musicians would come in. We'd stay there with Norman. Man, I need you to come fix up this spot on the bass. Oh, okay. And I'd get up, go in there, grab my bass, tune up, hear what I needed to fix. Okay, I can fix that part. Go back out there and go back to sleep until all the stuff he wanted to get done, like there were always overdubs. We always laid a basic track, and then we'd come back and lay some kind of overdubs, right? That would go on all the time. And Norman was a lot of fun. He was a lot of fun. He was kind of sarcastic. He had kind of a sarcastic sense of humor. Was always saying smart aleck stuff, and it was always fun. It was always funny. But then there would be times when he would when he gets fatigued, he would get on edge. You know, he'd get on edge, and everybody would know it, and everybody would just kind of calm down and be cool. He didn't allow, so I was never really into drugs or anything like that. And I think that's another thing he liked about me, that I wasn't a druggie. Because we had guys who were really into drugs, and Norman didn't allow drugs in the studio at all. So that was kind of a thing for him, and his standard for production was very high. It was really kind of high, and what I appreciated, what happened to me as a young man coming into that environment, being a self-taught guy. My standard went from okay to I'm playing on gold records. I got to be up here, you know. After I played on my 4th gold record, he gave me as a gift, right? Just out of the blue, he went out and bought me an Alembic bass, right? In 1978. I had never seen a bass so fine. It was a $3,000 bass guitar back in 1978. Now that same bass guitar is worth like $10,000. But he gave that to me. He just gave it to me as a gift. He says, "Man, this is for all your hard work." And as soon as I saw the case, I knew exactly what it was. Case is huge, right? I knew exactly what it was. And I think the first session I did on that bass was Showtime. You know, I think Showtime was the very first session I did on that bass, because I remember.
That's a nice upgrade from the Funk Masters.
Say that again?
That's a nice upgrade from the Funk Masters.
Oh, yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. Yeah. Whew. Yeah. It was a good time, man.
He has a ton of writing credits. But did he actually play any instruments? He couldn't sing, right? So how did he work sort of like a James Brown or George Clinton, where he would convey all these ideas to musicians and do it that way?
Basically, that's how he did it. Sometimes he would come in and he'd bang a pattern, because he was very pattern orientated, right? He would bang a pattern out on a piano, just kink, 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 okay. And then we would have to come in and fill it in with our own little flavor. So he really liked working with me and Walter and Izzy, because we had really, all three of us had really good ears. You know, we were, like I said, when we came off the road, we were chop heavy. You know, we came off of years of just touring and playing and doing 5-hour a night gigs and rehearsing in the daytime, and we just chop heavy. You know, we knew how to play, we knew how to make it feel good. So he really liked working with us because we had good ears. We listened well to what he had, and so the three of us got a lot of sessions on the on Norma's studio. It was great.
Did you feel like he paid a lot of attention to what was going on in music in general then, and was, you know, wanting to, you know, keep up with or keep ahead of trends and that kind of thing?
He did. He did. That's the other thing that he taught me. One thing I appreciate, that we always monitored the charts. We always monitored the charts. Bum City considered ourselves, or Mammatapee considered ourselves, a funk band. So we were watching what was happening with, at the time, you know, it was the Commodores, it was Earth, Wind and Fire, and then Cameo came out. And when Cameo came out with "I Just Want to Be What You Want Me to Be," right? And there were just elements of grooves like that we started to like incorporate and put our own little spin on it, you know, group, you know, Cameo and Slave and those kind of groups. But then at the same time, Norman was watching pop stuff like what Dick Griffey's groups, Shalimar and Leon Silvers was doing. In fact, Leon hung out over at Fort Knox. But I didn't tell you the story. I'll tell you the story of Fort Knox. Fort Knox was Norman's studio that he bought specifically to be Whitfield Records studio. But Leon Silvers used to hang out over there with us when we would be tracking, or just be around there where all of this was going on. And then he'd go back and he'd be doing like the Whispers or Shalimar or even his group, the Silvers. And we'd be watching each other's stuff. Who else was part of that mix was Edwin Starr produced Carlton with a "She's a Bad Jammer." Yeah. He cut that track right there in Fort Knox, right there in Norman's studio. That's where we recorded that, or he recorded that track. I didn't play on it. I was there because I was hanging out, but I didn't play on that. But he cut that track there. I think Michael Nash played keyboards on that. Played the synth bass. Why you do it? Go. It was a funky groove though.
Michael Nash of Rose Royce for viewers. Yeah.
Michael was a great keyboard player too. He was a great keyboard player. And the thing about Michael, it was almost like Michael knew Norman liked to try new stuff. So as soon as a new Oberheim came out, Michael went and brought it in. Hey, Norman, take a listen to this. And Michael seemed to be the first one in the company that always had the newest gear that was coming out. It was very cool. And we'd all be sitting around listening like, wow, man, how many voices? 8 voices. Oh, that's great, man. The 8-voice synthesizer. Now synthesizers have a 64-voice polyphonic now, but in those days that was pretty exciting,
Yeah.
And the ARPs and all of that. Michael always seemed to have the new stuff, and he knew how to use it. That's one of the things another thing that I had to learn. I noticed that a lot of keyboards would buy a new synth and they would play it like a piano, but really with an understanding, and Norman understood that the synth is a whole new instrument. It might have keys on it, but you don't play it like a piano. You have to figure out how to apply these unique sounds and unique patches to your music, and you can't play it like you play a piano. You have to come up with a different approach. And I learned so much from Norman in sitting around with him and the keyboard player, experimenting, figuring out how to turn the dials and use the filters and the oscillators to create this sound that hadn't been used before on a record, on any records. And it was pretty exciting. It was pretty exciting. You'd hear something and say, okay, yeah, that's it. No, this doesn't work. Let's try this. And we'd sit around for hours, and I'm sitting around listening to these guys do this. And he had two keyboard players who really, really understood that. Both of them were Rose Royce guys. Victor Nix. Victor Nix was a really just an amazing keyboard player who understood synths, and Victor was really good at understanding how to apply the presets. All synths had presets, right? Stuff that they suggest you try this. Victor would try it and say, oh yeah, I can use this to do this. And Michael Nash was real good at filters and oscillators and turning the dials and taking a basic sound and changing it. And Norman was real patient with these guys to allow them to create like that, to come out with, yeah, it really was. It was a laboratory for all of us. And I'm sitting around listening to this, learning, because, when I first saw synths, I was still like, Fender Rhodes kind of a sound, or just a clav kind of a sound, or organ, because those are classic instruments, right? But synths came in with a whole different texture, and like that opening line on "Love Don't Live Here Anymore," that opening synth line, it's like a real creamy lead line, and Norman understood how that would just kick this song off, with that rich sound that's so different and mysterious sounding. And then that line comes in, and that girl and Gwen come in with, "You are better than me, love don't love it anymore." She was really good too. Just the texture, a song like that, and the way he used textures were really, really exciting, really good.
What was Wawa Watson like? I mean, he unfortunately left us not too long ago, and such a legendary player. And I just was always a big fan, from the stuff he did with Herbie Hancock to the Whitfield stuff. And what was he like?
Man, I love the dude. He was a bit of a smart ass, right? He was a bit of he was another one who was kind of sarcastic, but boy, he could play. He could play. He was great. He was funny too. He was funny too. Him and Norma would kick it off. Just talking junk, just talking East Coast junk, and I remember sitting in the studio laughing between the two of them. But he's another one. I think one of the things. So see, he called me for a couple of sessions outside of Whitfield Records, and I think he called me because in the heart that we have was making the music feel good. That was my thing. My thing was, if it doesn't feel good, it ain't good. So I always played what felt good, and I think he picked that up from me. And we actually wrote a couple of songs together, but he picked that up for me, that he liked me on bass because I could make the music feel good. And so we did a lot of sessions together. We did a whole lot of stuff. And then I brought him in, like when Norman set me, at one point, Norman put me in charge of finishing or producing the Mammatapee albums, right? And I brought Watson in on Oh man, I brought Watson in on several of the things that I did. I did first of all on the Junior Walker album. I produced half of Junior Walker's first album on the Whitfield label, the one that got nominated for Grammy, and I brought Watson in on that. I brought Watson in on our first, or Mamatapee's first single was a song called "Long Distance Love." And I wasn't sure what to have Watson play. I just said, dude, just do what you do. Make it sound good. And he put that lick on, and he had that little guitar bullet thing that was, right, which was so cool. I mean, it was just funky, and he knew exactly how to place it, where to place it to make it just kick you. You know what I mean? He knew exactly how to do it. So right. It was so cool, and I brought Watson in on oh man, what else did I do? Several things that I did, that I wrote and produced, that I brought Watson in, and a couple of things he did the same thing. He brought me in because he knew I could make the bass feel good. At least that's what I thought. I thought we had the same kind of heart, you know, when we would be creating with Norman. You know, there was a couple of sessions where Norman would bring in a little drum machine, one of those little funk boxes, the original drum machines. They call them funk boxes, right?
Yeah, from Grand Central Station is where I first heard that. But
okay, yeah,
chocolate, yeah.
Norman brought one in, and he just like Norman banging on the piano, Watson playing guitar, and me playing bass to a funk box. And then he'd bring in other musicians, like he'd bring in James Gadson, would play real drums over the funk box, but it would still be in the background. And we, because we knew how to make it feel good, you know, we just knew how to make it feel good. So, and I loved Watson. I love Watson. He was a little smart ass, but he was a great player, and he was a lot of fun.
It's funny when you say that, the personality wise. I keep thinking of his cover of his only solo record with the Sherlock Holmes motif. I don't know if you remember that. So.
Yeah.
The Junior Walker record was Backstreet Boogie. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
I was so excited about that because that was the first time in my life that somebody had gave me authority to produce a major act on what to me was a major label. This was a major label to me because the label had so many hits during that period. This was a major label, and I was 22 years old, and Norman says, I want you to help me produce this Junior Walker album. And I'm like, what? What? I'm 22 years old, right? So I wrote exactly half this album. I think it's, well, not exactly half. I think it's 7 songs on the album, and I wrote and produced 3 or 4 of them, something like that. And then the album got released, and it got nominated for a Grammy. My first time out, you know, my first production out got nominated for a Grammy, and it helped cement my status in Whitfield Records, you know, as a label. I didn't even know I got nominated. I came in just on my regular coming in to hang out, and Norman said, "Hey, are you proud?" I said, "I'm proud about what?" He says, "You got nominated for a Grammy." I went, "What?" He said, "Yeah, our Norman album, our Junior Walker album got nominated for a Grammy." I said, "You're kidding?" And he wasn't kidding, you know. So I was pretty proud of that. We didn't win, you know, but I thought for 22 years old, that was pretty special for a kid who a self-taught kid who learned how to produce sitting around with this legend, you know. I mean, who learned how to do this just by, you know, there's some things that you have to, to study to learn, and there's some things that you learn from osmosis. You just learn from being in that, you be in the company of greatness, and some of that greatness rubs off on you, and you just kind of, you work with it. You know, you run with it. You take what you learn and you run with it. And that's what it was like with Norman. You know, his so much, he exuded so much creativity and so much greatness and understanding about what works, that, you know, this times he'd be saying stuff I don't even know if he knew what he was saying you know, was just like he was teaching so many people. There were so many people that he was teaching there. I mean, it was a lot of us were just like, you know, was just gleaning from the things he would do and the things he would say.
Did he ever get nostalgic or share stories from Motown?
Yeah. Yeah, he did that all the time. He did
What do you
that.
say about Berry Gordy? Good stuff?
Both. He said good stuff and bad stuff about Gordon Berry. It's good stuff and bad stuff. I probably be better for me not to say the stuff I remember, you know. So I'm gonna avoid that question.
I'm sure he had some amazing stories.
Yeah.
You know, and when you were talking, Mark, about that period and, you know, experimenting with sounds and, you know, those other groups like Cameo and Slave and all them, people that didn't live through that era of music and maybe go back now and hear some of the songs in isolation or go back and listen to them, they miss the experience of the sort of chronological development of it all, you know. And back then it was amazing because it was developing so fast. The technology of the instruments was changing, the musical innovation was changing, and it was so competitive and such a golden era of funk and funk jazz. And it pushed it, that competitiveness and the tools and the whole vibe, it just pushed it to such heights. You know, I just miss that. And I don't know that, not you know, having not lived through it, you may not be able to fully grasp that, but you know, it was just an amazing time.
It really was. It was very special. It was special. I realized that God had blessed me to be in that position at that time with those people, and Whitfield had Norman had a great little family of artists and writers. I mean, people, all of them left just the camaraderie and the fellowship of these creative minds left really, really impression on me. That's, I'm so grateful that, you know, I was able to be a part of that as a young man, you know, from pretty much from 22 years old to 27 years old. I was just locked into that whole thing with, you know, when I think of some of the people that I worked with, some of the artists and the writers. I worked with Miles Gregory, who wrote "Love Don't Live Here Anymore." I wrote with Robert Daniels. I worked with Willie Hutch. You know, I worked with several players. There was a group called Nitro, who had just amazing musicians, right? Led by a young man named Pepper Reed. Pepper was a monster guitar player, just a monster guitar player. And Kenny Scott, who later left, he later ended up playing with Rick James and the Punk Funk Horns. Kenny Scott, Morris Payne, and Chris Powell, who were part of Nitro. And they had a really good bass player. Ted Willingham was just a great bass player. And I just think about those guys, the guys in Masterpiece, you know, Robert Daniels, Spyder Turner. Spyder Turner was a character, man. He was and a great songwriter. just the whole family that he had assembled there. Um, it was just really a great, blessed time, and I consider it. I dropped out of college to get into the music industry, and within 3 years from the time I dropped out of college, I ended up in the studio with Norman Whitfield. And the next 5 years were a massive, that was my college education. It was a massive education in the music industry and in production. I learned so much in those 5 years of doing it, being part of it, playing on all those records, singing on all those background sessions, working with all these artists, writing all these songs, and the competition. Norman recognized that competition between his writers, between the designated writers, elevated the product. So he kept all of us competing. I mean, we were all competing. Everybody was competing to get a song on the Rose Royce album, right? Miles Gregory was the first one to get a song on the Rose Royce album, and Miles was a great writer, and then everybody was just trying to, like, okay, write something that Norman's gonna like, that's gonna to get on the album. So I was really honored that I got to do the title track for Golden Touch, and it was but it was the drive of that competition, and it was a friendly competition. We all honored each other. We all, somebody would write a song and everybody else would love it, even if it meant that they didn't get a shot on one of the major acts. The only one that changed that around was when Willie Hutch came in. Willie was the guy who wrote "You and I Must Make a Pact." Willie came in, really didn't let anybody else write on any of his song, on any of his product.
He was old school at that point.
He was old school, yeah. He was old school. He was his own. He was a legend in his own right at that point. So, but it was just it was really fun. I ended up doing a couple of junior albums, and my first production nominated for a Grammy, and then my group Mammatapee, we finally had a hit song. It was only regional. It only hit in certain areas. It never took off, but it was huge in the Southeast. It got to be pretty big in the Southeast.
What was that track called?
It was called Monster Fun. Monster Fun, and it was it didn't go gold or anything, but it was huge back in the
F-U-N or F-U-N-K?
Fun, F-U-N.
Okay.
Yeah.